Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion. It's not a straightforward review. It's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And if you sign up, you get a bonus episode that just kind of covers what I'm up to, what I'm watching that week. We've also had a lot of interviews on there too, where we've covered Loki, WandaVision, Mandalorian. We have a lot of fun over there. And I want to take a moment to thank our top patrons, and they are Chris Balga, Jeff Woodman, Phil Barker, and Michael Cross. Thank you guys so much for keeping the lights on. And if you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate the show. It does help new listeners find us. I have a new guest with me here today. I have Kari Nissena. She is an actress, a producer, and a business coach for actors. Say hi, Kari.
Well, hello. Hi, Kari.
Hey, and I kind of gave you an intro there, of course, but would you mind kind of introducing yourself a little bit to the audience?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit of a movie junkie, but,
Yay, you've come to the right place.
I had a feeling. Yeah, I love movies so much that that's what I've basically done for my whole life. So I am an actor, and I've produced short films along with like webisodes and educational things. And then I'm also a business coach for actors, where I help them with basically all the stuff that they can't get help with elsewhere. So a lot of actors come into the biz where they have training, they know the craft of acting, but then have no clue on how to make some money doing it and how to make a living out of it, which is really the harder part of the piece of puzzle. So,
oh yeah, I imagine.
And then I love movies so much. It's like I could watch movies all day long.
Same.
So what a great podcast you have.
Yeah, so excited to have you on. And my guest always picks the movie. So what movie did you choose to talk about today?
Groundhog Day.
Yay, 1993.
Yes.
Groundhog Day. I feel like this is good timing, actually, to talk about this movie. Do you feel that way? Because, that Ghostbusters Afterlife came out.
Well, and I feel like the whole planet has felt like they've been in Groundhog Day for the last year and a half or so.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's very timely, and it's one of those movies that doesn't age either. Like, you ever notice that? Like, it's just as new now as it was almost 30 years ago when it was made.
I agree. 100%. Well, before we continue, I do want to give a quick disclaimer. If this is the first time you're listening to this show, we do not do spoiler-free reviews. So I would recommend pausing here, watching Groundhog Day, because it's a great movie. And then if you're still here, this is the quick synopsis of the film. A cynical TV weatherman finds himself reliving the same day over and over again when he goes to a location to the small town of Puxatawny to film a report about their annual Groundhog Day. His predicament drives him to distraction until he sees a way of turning the situation to his advantage.
Dun, dun, dun!
Yes. I love this film. It was directed by Harold Ramis, which, I recently saw the new Ghostbusters Afterlife movie, which feels like such a huge tribute to him. So I was kind of in the feels when I was watching this.
Yeah, he seems like anytime you see him in an interview, or even if you see him on camera, I swear the guy had a permanent smile.
Yeah. Oh, what a nice thing to say about somebody, huh? What a nice way to be remembered.
Yeah. Seemed like a
But
really, really great guy. I wish I would have had a chance to work with him, you know?
yeah. So when did you first see this movie?
You know what? I feel like it's been such a part of my life. I don't even remember. I don't recall the first time I saw it because I feel like I've seen it so many times. I don't
Mhm.
remember the origin story for it in my life. But it's always been at one of the top of my list because it's so complete and so, I mean, it really has everything from humor to true depth that
Mhm.
most movies don't ever touch on, and real romance, and it makes you think. I love a movie that makes you think,
Oh, for sure.
you know. And I mean, you could really like ponder on it for decades because it's it's so much deeper than your average movie, and the fact that it looks on the surface like maybe like a typical, it has that 80s kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like it would be a typical 80s comedy on the surface, but then when you get into it, you're like, wow, this is actually some pretty deep stuff.
Mhm. It's got that, like, 90s edge to it since it's 93, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I have a similar experience to you that I don't remember the first time I saw this. I saw it many, many times, and, growing up, Bill Murray was just such a big deal to me.
Yeah.
I probably watched, Saturday Night Live too young, so, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, I mean, everybody, they just, that show was so big for me, and then just all the movies that they were involved in, I was obsessed with, Ghostbusters and
Yeah.
Blues Brothers, and, it's just so
Stripes.
Stripes, yes.
Mm.
Caddyshack, I mean, just there's so many.
Yeah.
But, so this movie was kind of always a part of my life, but I think especially as a child, I think it was one of the ones that I watched the most. Maybe it was the Groundhog, I don't know. Um, but I liked this, it was probably at the top of my list for sure.
Yeah. That's another great thing about it, I think, is that you have uh, people from all around the world and all ages can appreciate this movie. So it's not one type of audience.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very well put. Um, I also want to mention a couple quick facts. Just I like to kind of throw in a couple facts
Yeah.
when I was researching this. So Bill Murray was apparently bitten by the groundhog twice
Yeah.
during shooting and had to
Yeah.
have an anti-rabies injection, which isn't surprising. I feel like anytime you're bit by an animal, that happens. But his bites were very severe, so I guess they entertained the idea he might be rabid.
Yeah. Apparently the thing hated him.
Well, well, I mean, Bill Murray does have a reputation for being hard to work with, so maybe even the gopher had a hard time. I don't know. But that's so funny to me that thing is big. I mean, I would be intimidated by it, and I certainly wouldn't want
Yeah.
to be bitten by one.
And they always say don't act with animals,
Yeah.
anyway, but one that's mad at you, you definitely don't want to act.
Yeah, that must have been a very stressful shoot. Here's this next fact I really like because it's something that I hadn't even thought of. But according to the director, Harold Ramis, he said most of the time when he was trying to explain a scene to Bill Murray would interrupt him and say, "Just tell me, is this good or bad, Phil?" And
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
love that.
yeah,
Isn't
it's
that
like there's
funny?
two different Phils in the movie, and of course, they typically shoot movies out of sequence, as you know. So it's like, well, which Phil am I today?
That's hilarious because it's like I don't want any of the deep method stuff, just good fill or bad fill. End of
Yeah,
story.
I really like actors like that. So the last one I have is that Harold Ramis originally wanted Tom Hanks for the role, but decided against it because he said Hanks is just too nice.
Yeah. Well, I think even Tom Hanks thought that. Like he didn't he was offered the role, but he thought that his fans wouldn't want him to play a jerk at that time.
Oh.
which is it kind of makes sense. I think he
Yeah.
would have been great in the role. They also looked at, apparently, I mean, who knows from the internet, but I'm obsessed with the movie, you know, so, but apparently they offered it also to Michael Keaton.
Oh, I could actually see that.
Yeah, you could definitely see the dark side.
He's got an edge to him, you know,
Yeah.
like he could.
And back then he still looked somewhat like Mr. Mommy, you know,
Yeah.
so that would have worked. And then one of my favorite actors of all time, Kevin Kline, as well, which I think he would have been an amazing choice.
Oh, good point.
Isn't that interesting? Because
That
it would totally change the movie, not only just from the actor side of things, but Bill Murray really was instrumental in the whole vision of the film too, more so than most actors do.
mm,
You know, so apparently, rumor has it, Harold wanted it lighter. It actually started out as a really dark script,
wow.
but Harold brought in the laughs, and Bill Murray wanted it to be a little bit more profound and deep
Mm,
than even what ended up as the final thing. So I think the mixture of those two geniuses together, even though they were kind of fighting each other apparently, um, because Murray wanted it deeper and Harold wanted it lighter, it ended up being the perfect film.
yeah, they balanced each other out.
Yeah,
Sometimes
even
you
though
need
they
that.
didn't agree, it we got the results of, oh yeah, thank God that they were balancing each other out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think, you know, I could almost see Tom Hanks in the role only because I'm thinking of like A League of Their Own, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's a little bit of a jerk sometimes
Yeah,
in that.
yes.
But this is a little further than that. I mean, it's definitely a Bill Murray-esque type character.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I don't know. That's so interesting. Sometimes people that are just opposites just really can balance each other, and yeah, I agree. They came up with the perfect film as a result.
And it's interesting when you think about how stars have more pull than, say, a normal actor.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, so he kind of drove the traffic and into the way that he wanted the film to go,
Mhm.
where not everybody gets that opportunity. So
For
if
sure.
someone else just stepped into the role, it might have been a completely different film above and beyond the acting part of it.
That makes sense.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about the cast?
Sure. So you have the wonderful and wacky Bill Murray, as we've stated. Um, and Andy McDowell is his love interest in the film, uh, who she's a delight, I think,
Yes.
in the movie as well. I'd be interested to know who else was up for her role, if there were any.
Yeah.
Um, I've heard her in interviews before say that she got along well with Bill,
Oh, that's good.
um, because I think that her background, apparently, uh, she had dealt with some people in her family or something that had some alcoholism or something. So she was
uh,
used to being a people pleaser.
mm,
And so she was very good with people that other people might have thought were too difficult.
mm,
So that's interesting because you got to
it
have
is
chemistry when you're talking about romantic leads.
for sure.
But you look at the movie and there's a lot of scenes where she's laughing at him,
Hmm.
at his jokes and stuff, and they say it's actually Andy laughing at Bill. I mean, she'd have to repeat it, of course, because you have to have continuity. This is the craziest movie ever for continuity.
Oh, I'm sure that must have been a nightmare.
Can you even imagine that job?
Yeah.
but um, but I find that interesting to see, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, you know, how different personalities mix together, especially when it's take after take. In this case, take after take after take, and month after month. And what they had in this film they had well, not so unusual, but extreme weather
Oh,
where,
wow.
where they were legitimately like worried about frostbite, like their toes are
Oh
going to
my
fall off,
gosh.
mixed with it, they were shot into when it got to be warm again. So they
Mm,
still had to wear their heavy wool coats in like 80-degree weather as well.
wow.
So that's
You would
pretty
never even
extreme.
notice.
And it looks so cold. The whole movie just
It
looks
really
freezing.
does. Well, because
And some
like, it's in
blood.
February, and I do feel like February is, like, colder, in a lot of
Yeah.
places than even January, so it really captures, like, that 1 month that's kinda miserable.
Yeah. And in Phil's world, the month never ends. The day never ends.
Yep.
It has to stay miserable. It's an interesting, wow. How do you get that kind of continuity? Because
I
sometimes
know.
they show clips in like the behind the scenes stuff where they're jumping up and down just to stay warm in between takes, and they would
Ugh.
actually um, sometimes would be slurring their words because their tongues were freaking frozen.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was so cold. So
Miserable.
it's one thing to do that for like an hour, but it's a really, for anybody who hasn't worked on a set, it's hard work because you're
Yeah.
sometimes there in the same freezing cold for like 16 hours, you know,
Gosh.
with no
Yeah.
sleep and no, I mean, yeah, they got to give you breaks because of laws and stuff, but still you're
Grueling.
frozen for hour after hour after hour.
Yeah.
But I found it interesting that it also ended up being like 80 degrees and having to still feel like the movie still had to feel like it was cold.
Right. Well, I also like, in the movie, you mentioned Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell, obviously the front runners of the film, but, you know, lately, Chris Elliott's having a moment, right?
Yeah.
Thanks to Schitt's Creek. So
Yeah,
it's
which I
nice seeing
love.
him. I love that show too, but I've liked Chris Elliott as an actor for a long time, and I kind of forgot he was in this one, so I was like, "Oh, it's him," when I
Yeah,
saw it.
his character is funny because it's kind of on the sideline, but
Mhm.
you look at what he's doing and that even that character has layers.
Yeah.
He's looking for love, poor guy, and he's doing his best and he's a nice guy, but then he's also a little bit of a loser, like when he takes his tip back.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
you remember that? He's trying to tip big in front of the girl, and then when nobody's looking, he takes part of his tip back.
He's broke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. He's a funny dude for
yeah,
sure.
and then also, wanted to talk about Brandon Doyle Murray, Bill's brother,
Yeah.
who I always mistake for, like, I don't know why, to me, he sounds like Mel Blanc. Like, he sounds like, the boss on the Jetsons, you know? Like, and I
Yeah.
think that in every movie he's in, like, in this and in, like,
Mr.
I know he's in, like,
Spacely.
National Lampoon's Christmas, yeah.
That's
And
funny.
that's
And
just what I think of him.
I think it's weird because every time you see him in a movie, it's kind of Bill's face,
Yes. Very
but not.
true.
Like
And
you
he's
can tell
always
they're
doing,
brothers.
like a caricature, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he's like, he sounds like, like in this movie, he's very animated. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on him really quick. Was there anyone else in the cast that I've missed that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think Marita did a great job.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Nancy Taylor. Um, I thought she did a great job, and Needle Nose Ryerson with Ned Ryerson.
Yes.
That's a pretty classic role.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
it's funny. There's an interview out there where he's talking about how he was going so big, and he had to give warning to Harold. He's like, okay, I'm rehearsing this, and I think it's really, really big. I'm going to try it really, really big, and you can bring me back if it sucks. you know? And it was almost too big for the movie, but it worked.
Yeah, I think it worked. Yeah, the actor is Stephen Tobolsky.
Yeah.
He I don't know. There's something about like going to a small town, coming from a small town, running into somebody from high school you didn't want to run into. Like he just nailed that so well.
Totally. He's just a
Yeah.
little bit too close, like he doesn't understand
Yeah.
personal space.
And
And
then selling you life insurance. I mean, it's just annoying.
right, he
It's
has
like it
the most boring profession
yeah.
to man and traps him with it. I mean, it's perfect.
It is. It is.
What's funny about Steven is you look at like his IMDb these days and he looks exactly the same. I
Some
mean, this,
actors are so good. Like the character actors, I feel like are usually like that.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, I'm trying to, and there's a couple hidden roles in there, like Willie Garson. He's
Oh.
at the beginning of the movie. He works at the news station.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, uh, what's this? Oh, Rick Dukeman,
Mhm.
one of the drunk friends that he has. So there's like little small roles in there that are like little mini treasures.
Yeah.
I love that,
Yeah, I
especially
love
when
like
they
oh,
weren't
go ahead.
famous back then. Maybe even I don't know.
Yeah. Mhm. Either small roles or cameos too.
Yeah.
Well, would you like to talk about some of your favorite scenes?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Yeah. You know what? I found these little buried treasures online
Oh, go for it.
that there's if you go on YouTube, there are some great deleted scenes,
Oh, okay.
which I feel like anytime you find like you have one of your favorite movies and you can find more, it's like dessert or something,
Oh,
you
for
know.
sure.
So in the movie, if there's anyone out there that doesn't know Groundhog Day, he gets to learn. He's living forever, basically, in the same day. So
Mhm.
he has essentially an eternity to learn things, which is like
Yeah.
a dream come true for me. I actually would like a little bit of Groundhog Day. Um, but he learns piano, he learns French, he learns how to ice sculpt, he has time to read, you know. um
Mhm.
he can eat whatever he wants, right, as much as
Yeah.
he wants, because
That scene's great.
no tomorrow. And I love to learn, but in these deleted scenes he also becomes like he bowls a perfect game in bowling.
Mhm.
In a small town, that's a big deal. He's like a hero.
Yeah.
um he also becomes like a pool hustler, and it's funny because he knows all the games that are going to win,
Yeah.
because he knows every sport that's played that day or whatever, so he
Right,
could bet
right.
on it or whatever. But yeah, those deleted scenes are really great. But I love, probably out of the most, I love the montages where he starts to become a good guy,
Mhm.
because he decides that he can't escape, so might as well relax and do some good,
Mhm.
and actually help other people, because his character is in the beginning very selfish.
Yeah.
um,
Selfish, bitter, cynical. Yeah.
totally. And looks down on everybody and everything.
Mhm.
But then he starts to be like, okay, let me help everybody. And so he's changing tires for three old ladies. Where they get a flat tire. There's actually a little deleted scene where he saves a little girl from running in front of a truck,
Mhm.
and then he gives her a lecture. Don't do that. And he saves this jerk little boy that falls out of a tree. Um, and probably the saddest part of the whole movie is that he can't, no matter what he does, he can't save this sweet homeless man, an
Mm.
old man. And that's when he starts to really become a good guy. He's like, there's nothing he can do to save him.
Yeah.
So it becomes deeper at that point. The whole
Yeah.
film takes another feel of no matter what he does, he can't help this guy, and he really wants to at that point.
Yeah.
So that's pretty sweet. And it's the sweetest little old man. Like, you really do want to hug him and give him soup and stuff, So I think that part of the film is probably one of the best. Is
Yeah.
just I love a montage anyway. I'm totally a sucker for a montage and a
That feels
makeover.
like such an, you kept saying this movie does remind you of like 80s films. That feels like such an 80s movie thing to do.
Yeah, and I dig it
Hmm.
because this is one of the most important movies ever for showing a time lapse.
Yeah, for sure.
Ironically, where there is no time lapse, I guess, but it has to show. It's funny, there are some, depending on who you listen to or who you believe, some people, that's one of the big arguments about this movie is how long did he stay in Groundhog Day. And so online, and apparently Harold Ramis apparently said it probably ended up being 30 to 40 years.
Oh
uh,
my gosh.
and because of how they got that is it takes years to become that good at piano, or it takes a certain amount of time to learn a new language or to learn how to ice sculpt or whatever. you know
Yeah.
uh, there are some, I think it might be a deleted scene, I don't remember, but even for the old man, I don't know if you remember when he goes to the hospital and he says, the nurse is saying sometimes people just die, and he goes, not today. He goes, let me see his chart. And so Phil goes to look at the old man's chart to see if there's anything he can do to fix it the next time.
Oh.
And there's this little sliver, it's not even a scene, but he apparently starts studying to try to learn.
Oh.
And maybe that's why he got good at, he gives a guy a Heimlich maneuver
Right.
when he's choking on a cow or whatever in the restaurant. And he helps, well, he does save the little boy from falling out of the tree, but he does a lot of good deeds like that too,
Hmm.
that not everybody knows how to do. He tries to give CPR to the old man when he dies in an alley one time.
Hmm.
So he's
No,
got
I never
skills.
noticed any of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Very
really
cool.
tiny. But
Hmm.
yeah, I love it. Can you imagine having endless time to learn everything that you've wanted to learn?
It sounds a little daunting if I'm honest.
Totally,
But good too. I know what you mean.
totally, but exciting. And it would be different if it was like today. If you could have a computer in Punxsutawney, then really
True.
you're talking a million years, because you'd have endless knowledge with a
Yep.
computer.
Absolutely.
What do you think that you would do if you had to do like today over again?
Hmm. I don't know. I have never thought about it. Is that weird? um,
Well,
I
think
think
that's one of the
just
great things about it is it
yeah.
makes, I think about that a lot. It's like, okay, what if you could do something over again?
Yeah. I haven't thought about that a lot, but just spend a lot of time with friends and family, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting because we don't always prioritize it, but if we had only one day and could do that day until we get it right,
True.
the question is, what would we do with that time? I think it's so
Yep.
profound.
Do you also feel like to me the movie like Bill Murray, yeah, he's selfish and all that, but I think he's like depressed, right? I mean, I almost feel like the movie's a metaphor for depression or trauma and like working through it. He's stuck,
Yeah.
can't move forward. And through reliving this day over and over and over again, he sort of processes and starts to see life in a different way. I think before he just wasn't able to see anything positive. I wondered if that's one reason why Rita is so kind to him. Like, she gets irritated with him, but I think at first she gives him a lot of time before she finally has enough with his attitude. But it's
Yeah,
like maybe she can kind of see behind those layers that he's struggling with something and he's stuck.
I think that's true. And I think that's one of the most kind-hearted pieces of the film
Hmm.
is that nothing changes except for Phil.
Right.
So, but once he changes, the world is so much better because of how he touches other people around him. But everybody else is accepting of him. Like you said,
Yeah.
Rita's a nice lady, a nice human. So
Hmm.
the second that he's nice, it's like everybody's better.
Yeah.
And everybody's, you know, nobody else has an attitude in that whole nice little town.
I
Like
know.
everybody's pretty like immediately cool to him, even though he's a stranger in town, really.
Yeah, if he had just stopped viewing himself as so much better and bigger than them, he would have realized that the way that how welcoming the whole town is towards him.
Right.
And I think, there's a trope, again, to go back to like tropes in 80s movies, of being somebody who's like a big career person that has let their career control their life in such a way that they're unable to enjoy it. Like, you get the sense that he's exhausted and overworked and he's just like go go go, and that's kind of also what's making him miserable to be around. Can't wait to get out of that town, can't wait to get his job over with.
Mhm.
And when he's able to slow down and really contemplate his life, that frees him from that constant pressure, I think. And it's sort of a metaphor for the way the town is too, because like it's a small town, so they already don't live that way. And I also
Yeah.
feel like that's kind of like that's how small towns view big cities, right? That everyone's moving too fast, that they're not really living their life. So I think some of that's at play there as well.
Yeah. And it's probably, I think maybe true happiness is somewhere in between. You take the good of the small
Hmm.
town and the good of the big town, you
Yeah.
know? But it's funny what you say about, like, I totally agree about the depression stuff. There, people have even talked about this movie, how Phil has to move through the stages of grief
Yeah.
because he starts out in complete denial, right?
Yeah, that's
So he
true.
starts out like, this can't be happening. What is going on? And then he gets pissed off. And then he gets so depressed that he's suicidal.
Hmm.
But another great thing about this movie is he's not allowed to commit suicide. It won't take.
He just
Which,
resets. Yeah.
yeah, it just resets. So it won't even let him do that.
I think I had read too that they were really nervous about, Bill Murray committing suicide essentially,
mm,
on screen, and how dark that is, and like would audiences be like, this is horrible. I'm sure that was a very delicate balance, like how to portray that in such a silly, over the top way to where audiences aren't turning on the movie.
that's a good point. It probably wouldn't be allowed today,
Yeah.
right? You'd have
Yeah.
everybody's social media um, saying how horrible it was, but it actually was great. And what they did is then it's 6 a.m. again, and it immediately goes to a joke
Yeah.
some of the time, like, oh
Gives you a
man,
break. Yeah.
yeah, it didn't work,
I think
so
they,
then it
they
lightens it up.
exactly, they lower the stakes. I mean, he can't
Yeah,
die, so in a way he's not really doing that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But boy, to hate that town so much, and how many times would you have to relive that day to have to resort to that? That's
Very true.
many, many, many years. Some people say I think Danny Rubin, the writer, originally started with the idea of vampires, believe it or not. And
Oh,
immortality is the seed of the beginning of writing Groundhog Day. Um,
interesting.
yeah. And so it started out like as 10,000 years, not
Whoa.
30 years, which that becomes a whole other ball game. It's like, oh, now we're talking thousands and thousands of years in that same, then that becomes much, much worse.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
That's a way different thing. I could handle 30, 40 years easy. But I actually wish, part of me wishes that I could, like, I'm pissed off that I ever have to die. Like, I'm really not happy about this. Okay. Like 100 years is not enough for me.
Yeah.
So I got too much to do. So I'm jealous of him in that I wish I could have like an extra 30, 40 years just to do certain things.
That's so funny. I've never thought of that. That's
Right?
this is why I love talking about movies, because everybody kind of has a different interpretation
Yeah.
and, in different lens. So I
Yeah.
completely understand that.
And you look at it at different times in your life and it's a different movie.
Very true. Like I was saying before, as a kid, I thought it was really funny. Being stuck at the same day sounded terrible. But as I get older, I sort of saw the layers in Phil himself and how he's more of a complex character than I realized as a kid,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And this movie is the reason why I know the name Puxatawny Phil. I will never forget it.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think you're
forgot
not
that, like,
alone.
yeah, I forgot that he had like this, that he was also named Phil. That's very funny.
And everybody, he keeps on getting mad because they're like, Phil, like the groundhog? And he's like, yeah.
He's like, in more ways than you know. um, are there any other scenes that we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to chat about, or other facts?
I'll tell you what, I don't know how many of your listeners have seen the musical,
Oh,
but
wow.
the musical I found on YouTube and it's one of my favorites. And there's layers in the musical that take the movie to a whole other level. Like there's some cool elements in it that, like, if you can't get enough of the movie, go and watch the musical and you'll get to even know the characters even deeper.
Very cool.
It's so good. And it's actually a lot racier than the movie because they can do what they want. So there's a lot of
Oh, for
cursing
sure.
in it. And what's so funny is Phil really sleeps around in the musical. He has a lyric.
Well, he has plenty of time to do it,
Totally. Here's his lyric. I wrote it down because I think you find it funny. So he slept with 90% of the women in Punxsutawney between ages 18 and 84.
Oh man, he really experimented.
And one dude when he was bored. That's the lyric.
Well, yeah, why not?
Why not? He's trying stuff out, but it's so funny because when you think of, oh my gosh, that's an interesting thought right there. It's like,
Yeah.
everybody in this small town, if he could get almost every woman in the whole town, then that is like he was, even though it was fake and manipulative, he was becoming whatever they needed or wanted.
Yeah.
To make that, to have an 84-year-old grandma, I think that's fascinating. But it's a wonderful musical, and it's like multimedia too. So it has really cool elements. Like it starts out with a bunch of TVs. So you're seeing him telling the news and stuff. And it has silly things like the car chases when he's all drunk driving with his buddies. So they show that like in black light theater. So you can actually watch the car chase. It's pretty fascinating.
That's cool. Yeah, there's definitely some scenes in the movie that you would think would be challenging to do in a play, but that's really cool.
Yeah. And how they make the day happen over and over again. It's like, why wouldn't that get boring? But it's not. It's fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So I highly recommend it. Of course, anytime anybody records a musical or stage production, it's like never as crisp, but it's definitely a good one to watch.
Yes, I completely agree. Well, I guess that brings me to our last couple of questions then.
Sure.
So if you had to sum it up, what about this movie keeps you returning to it? Why do you think you've seen it so many times?
Well, I do think it changes every time you watch it,
Agreed.
even though the irony is that nothing changes. Um, I do want more more years than we're allowed as humans. So looking into immortality and stuff like that is a very interesting conversation. And
Yeah.
it's apparent, like I said, it's apparently how even the thought of Groundhog Day started.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a very interesting background for it, for sure.
yeah, and they what's interesting is that every religion, when this first came out, all the religions claimed the movie as theirs,
Interesting.
right? So if they were Buddhist, they'd be like, "Oh, this is what we teach." And if they're Christian, "Oh, this is what we teach." This is what we teach. If they're Jewish, this is what we teach.
Interesting.
Because some people, they have different theories. Some people think he's in purgatory. Some people think he's in hell. Some people think, he doesn't get to go to heaven until he becomes a good person. So everybody has
Yeah,
different interpretations of it too,
very
which is really
interesting.
fascinating. And I like the type of movie where characters have a really big arc.
Yeah, that's a good point. He has a huge arc in this.
Yeah. So one other interesting tidbit that I found out is that the original scripts were very different.
Mm,
Apparently, they started in the middle originally.
okay.
So he started already in the time loop.
Gotcha.
And then there was a version where he ended in the time loop, almost like a punchline, like what we would see in a lot of different movies of, oh no, it's back to, like, how they do in horror films.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, all of a sudden someone's in the back of the car and then a jump scare or something. Um, but that was the ending, was that he's in the loop. One, originally they had Rita was in her own Groundhog Day.
Interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah,
I'm glad that they got rid of that one because it's already confusing enough as far as like,
agreed.
oh my god, how many years has this been and stuff like that. But I think it's interesting. I'd be intrigued.
Have you
Um,
seen Palm Springs?
no, I've seen the trailer and I've seen
Oh
clips
my
from
gosh,
it.
I couldn't stop thinking about that the whole time we're watching this, just how
Totally.
much it owes to this movie, but you should definitely check that out.
I know, it's totally a movie, and I liked things like Happy Death Day. Um,
Mhm.
I thought that was a great premise for a horror film. What are some of the other ones? Project Almanac, Tom Cruise's movie Edge of Tomorrow, Source Code. So there are movies that I think have stolen from Groundhog Day because it's such a fascinating concept, and then they've made it their own. But Palm Springs, that looks like an totally a Carrie movie.
Yeah. Well, Palm Springs is similar to Groundhog Day in that there's a lot of layers. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And for me, I keep coming back to this movie because again, as I mentioned before, I grew up with, a ton of films with Bill Murray in them. I loved him. And, this one was right up there with a movie that was on my regular rotation. I think it's funny. I think it's thought provoking. And yeah, I just really enjoy it. How do you pitch this movie, do you think, to someone that's never seen it before?
I think since it's kind of, what is the main premise? A guy has to live the same day over and over again till he gets it right.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. That
It's
could
so
be the
much
whole
deeper
summary.
than that, but it's kind of that
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
a
I would
sur-
say it's a classic for a reason. Sometimes films are enduring, like you said, it ages well. Um, maybe except for the consent part with when he's sleeping with all the women. But other than that,
Yes, yes.
um,
That does not age well.
That does not age well. But
Manipulation does not age
yeah,
well.
I do not condone that. But
Yes.
I think that, it's endured because it is such a funny and such a, you said it at the beginning, it's just so well done, as just a movie. And it's got the perfect balance, as you said before, too, of between Harold Ramis and Bill Murray. They just put something really special together, and I think pretty much anyone can enjoy it. So highly recommend.
Yeah. Two thumbs up right here, right?
Yeah, heck yeah. Well, Kari, thank you so much for coming on the show and for picking this movie. Where can people find you?
I am at Actor Transformation. That's where I coach my wonderful actors on basically the business side of the acting business. And then I'm also on IMDB. So Kari Nissena, and also social. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. I have a YouTube channel for the Actor Transformation.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And, you're definitely going to have to think of another movie, and I'm going to have you back soon.
Fabulous. You can tell I love to talk about movies.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks so much.